Kitchen smelled like burnt toast and old coffee the morning everything shifted. I remember standing at the counter, staring at the backyard through the window. My backyard, the one I'd spent 3 summers getting right, the garden beds I'd built with my own hands after Gerald passed, and realizing I hadn't been outside in weeks. Not because I couldn't, because somehow it didn't feel like mine anymore. That feeling had been creeping up on me for a long time. I just hadn't named it yet. My name is Sylviane. I'm 64 years old. I live in a 2-story house in Gloucester, just east of Ottawa, in a neighborhood where the maple trees are older than most of the marriages on the street. I bought this house with my husband 31 years ago. We scraped together the down payment from 2 incomes and a lot of skipped vacations. Gerald passed 6 years ago. Heart attack, very sudden, the kind that doesn't give you time to say anything useful, and since then the house has been mine alone. My name on the deed. My name on the property tax bills that arrive every February and make me wince a little even now. I'm a retired nurse. 32 years at the Montfort Hospital, mostly on the surgical floor. I'm not someone who falls apart easily. I've held people's hands while they died. I've stayed calm in rooms where calm was the only useful thing to offer. I say this not to sound impressive, but because it matters for what I'm about to tell you. Because when I look back at what I allowed to happen in my own home, I need to understand how someone like me, steady, experienced, not naive, let it go on as long as it did. My son Victor is 38. He was always a good kid in the way that means he never caused serious trouble, but I think I mistook the absence of trouble for the presence of character. He was quiet in school, graduated from Carleton with a business degree, found work in project management with a firm downtown. He called every Sunday. He came for Christmas. He was, by every visible measure, a good son. He met he met his wife at a conference in Toronto. She's originally from Edmonton, moved east for work, and she is, I'll say this plainly, a woman who knows exactly what she wants and has never once in her life been told she can't have it. I don't say that with contempt. In another context, I might even admire it. But in my house, it became something else entirely. They got married in September of 2019, small ceremony, just family and close friends, at a venue in the Gatineau Hills. It was a beautiful day. I cried, the good kind. I made a toast and meant every word of it. I was glad for my son. I wanted him to be happy. 6 months later, they asked if they could stay with me for a while. The story they gave me was reasonable. Their lease was up. They'd been planning to buy, but the Ottawa market had jumped badly, which was true. Anyone following real estate here in 2020 knew how bad it had gotten, and they just needed a few months to save up, get their finances sorted, find the right place. 3 months, maybe 4, just until things settled. I said yes. Of course I said yes. Victor is my son. I had the space. The upstairs had 2 empty bedrooms since his sister moved to Vancouver years ago. I told myself it would be nice to have some life in the house again. That's the word I used in my own head. Life. What I didn't account for was that the life they brought in wasn't interested in sharing space with mine. It was interested in replacing it. It started small. The way those things always do. His wife rearranged the kitchen within the first week. She said she was just optimizing it, her word, and she smiled when she said it, and I smiled back and told myself it was fine. Plates moved. The spice rack reorganized. The coffee maker I'd had for 9 years replaced with one of those capsule machines. She said the old one was taking up too much counter space. I found my coffee maker in the basement when I went looking for it. She hadn't asked. She hadn't mentioned it. I told myself not to make a thing of it. They were guests. Guests settled, get settled. I'd adjust. By month 3, they had begun referring to the house in a way that made the back of my neck prickle. Our place. Not their suite. Not upstairs. The whole house. When we have people over, we're thinking of getting a dog. Would that work here? I noticed. I filed it away. I didn't say anything. I should have said something. By month 5, my son had taken over the garage for storage. His wife had set up a home office in the sunroom that Gerald and I had built as a reading room, the one with the big window that faced the garden. She put up shelves. She put a lock on the door. A lock on the door of a room in my house. She said she needed to keep her work things secure. I stood in the hallway after she'd gone in and closed the door, and I remember thinking, this is strange. This is strange, and I don't know how to say so without seeming difficult. That was the trap, I think. The fear of seeming difficult in my own home. Month 8. They were still there. No mention of a timeline. When I gently raised it, I said something careful about whether they had any updates on the house search. My son looked uncomfortable, and his wife said the market was still impossible, which wasn't wrong, but it also wasn't an answer. She pivoted to asking whether the heating in the upstairs bathroom could be fixed, because it was taking too long to warm up in the mornings. In my house, that I pay to heat. I fixed the heating. I don't know why I fixed the heating. By the end of the first year, I had stopped inviting my friend Petra over. Petra had been my closest friend since we worked together on the surgical floor. She retired 2 years before me, and now she paints watercolors and complains about her knees, and she makes me laugh like nobody else. But every time she came over, my son's wife would make these pointed comments about noise, about the living room being kind of a shared space, about how she had early calls. Petra noticed. She asked me once quietly, "Syl, is everything okay there?" I said yes. I was embarrassed. I didn't want her to see what was happening. What was happening was this. I had become a guest in my own house. I want to be fair. My son wasn't cruel. He wasn't shouting at me. He wasn't threatening me. He wasn't doing anything that would look obvious from the outside. But there's a particular kind of quiet pressure that's hard to name until you're deep inside it. It's the way a room goes slightly tense when you walk into it. It's the way your son doesn't quite meet your eyes when you ask a direct question. It's the way you start making your tea in the morning and then retreating to your bedroom because the kitchen feels occupied in a way that has nothing to do with physical space. I was managing around them. That's the honest way to say it. In my own home, I was managing around them. The second year is harder to account for, in the sense that I still don't fully understand how I let it continue. Part of it was Victor. Whatever his wife had become in that house, he was still my son, and the thought of a real confrontation, the kind that might have consequences, that might fracture something permanently. I kept pulling back from it. I kept thinking there would be a natural moment, that they would find something, that one of them would get a promotion, a reason to move, and it would resolve itself without me having to say the hard thing out loud. The natural moment never came. What came instead, 26 months in, was a Sunday evening in March. I had been at my sister Bet's house for the afternoon. She lives in Canada. We have Sunday dinners sometimes, nothing formal. And I came home around 8. I walked in through the front door and found their friends in my living room. Not 2 or 3 people. 8. There was wine on my coffee table, the good table that Gerald refinished, and someone had pushed the armchairs to the walls, and there was music playing. My son was there, his wife was there, and they were hosting a dinner party. In my home, without mentioning it to me. I stood in the doorway for a moment. I smiled at people I didn't recognize. I said hello to my son, who looked, I noticed, slightly relieved that I was being normal about it. His wife made introductions without any acknowledgement that this was my house, without any apology for not telling me. Just, "This is Victor's mom." Not my name, not an explanation. And then she turned back to her friends. I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of my bed, and I felt something that had been building for 2 years quietly, finish building. I'm not an angry person by nature. Gerald used to say I had the patience of someone who'd learned that most things pass, which is true. Nursing does that to you. But there is a kind of patience that becomes something else when it's used against itself. When someone counts on your patience to avoid accountability, that's not patience anymore. That's a door left open that someone has walked through without you noticing. The next morning I called Petra. I told her everything, the whole 2 years of it, start to finish. She was quiet for a long moment when I was done, and then she said, "Syl, you know what you need to do." I knew. I also called my sister, and she said something useful. She said, "The problem with letting it go on this long is that they've built their life around a situation that was never supposed to be permanent. So when you finally say something, they're going to act like you're the one disrupting them." She was right. That's exactly what happened. I made an appointment with a lawyer in early April, a real estate and tenant law specialist, a woman named, well, I don't need to use her name, but she was excellent and direct, and she didn't make me feel foolish for what I'd allowed. She just told me what my options were. What she told me was clarifying. Because Victor and his wife had been living in my home for over a year, they had tenant rights under Ontario's Residential Tenancies Act, which applies in some contexts even when no formal lease is in place, even when no rent is exchanged. However, she told me there were specific provisions for owner-occupied properties. Since I lived in the home and it was my primary residence, I had what are called owner-occupied property rights, meaning I could pursue a formal notice to terminate their occupancy. It wasn't instant. It would take time, but it was real, and it was mine. She also pointed out something I hadn't thought about. Because they had never paid rent, not $1 in 26 months, there was no tenancy agreement to navigate, which actually simplified things in my favor. I want to say something here. For anyone in a similar situation, I was ashamed that it had gone so far. I kept thinking I should have handled it earlier, should have been clearer from the start, should have set terms from the very first month. And that's all probably true. But shame is not a reason to keep going in the wrong direction. It just means the right direction is overdue. I drafted the notice with my lawyer's guidance, a formal written notice to vacate, giving 60 days, compliant with everything it needed to be, compliant with. I had it prepared and signed and ready. Then I sat with it for 3 days, not because I doubted it, because I wanted to be certain of myself before I handed it over. I didn't want to do it in anger. I wanted to do it in anger. I wanted to do it clearly. On a Thursday evening, I called my son into the kitchen. His wife was home. She came in too, which was fine. I'd made tea because I needed something to do with my hands. I put the envelope on the table. My son looked at it. He asked what it was. I told him it was a formal notice to vacate the property. 60 days. The silence lasted maybe 4 seconds, and then his wife said in a voice that was very controlled, "Are you serious right now?" I said yes. She said that this was their home. She said they built their life here. She said she couldn't believe I would do something like this without any warning, without any discussion. She said the word legal twice in a way that was meant to be threatening. I said, "The house is in my name. It has always been in my name. You are welcome to speak with a lawyer." My son said very little. He looked like he was trying to locate something to say and couldn't find it. He looked, and this is the part that still sits in my chest when I think about it, like a person who had genuinely forgotten whose house it was. Not maliciously, just genuinely. It had been so long and so gradual that he had stopped tracking it. He said, "Mom, where would we go?" I said, "I don't know, sweetheart, but you have 60 days to figure it out." The next several weeks were not pleasant. His wife stopped speaking to me directly. My son would occasionally try to negotiate. Could they have 90 days? Could they stay in the basement if they converted it? Could we revisit this? And each time I said no, calmly, without anger, without wavering. No, no. What I did not do was apologize for it. That was the thing I had to hold on to. I had nothing to apologize for. Peter came over often. She helped me reclaim the sunroom, which we did together on a Saturday in May, just moved everything out of it while they were out, stacked her things in the upstairs hallway. Petra brought muffins. We had tea in the sunroom afterward, and I cried a little, and she didn't make it a big thing, which is exactly right. My sister came the weekend before they left and helped me feel steady. She's 3 years older than me, and she has a particular quality of being unimpressed by drama that I find enormously comforting. They moved out on a Saturday in June. I watched from the front window, not conspicuously, just at an angle, as they loaded a moving truck they'd hired. My son came to the door before they drove away. Just him. His wife stayed in the truck. He said he was sorry. He said he didn't know how things had gotten like that. He said he loved me. I told him I loved him too. I told him I loved him too. I told him I wasn't doing this to hurt him. I told him that what I needed was for him to understand that I am a person, not a resource, that this house is mine, not a vacancy he gets to fill when it's convenient. that I will always be his mother, but he has to be my son in a way that means something. He nodded. He cried a little. I didn't. Not then. I saved that for later. He called me the following week. It was a brief call. He said they'd found a rental in Nepean, a 2-bedroom apartment, and that it was fine. I said I was glad. He asked if he could come for dinner sometime. I said yes. Of course yes. He's my son. But things are different now, and I think they need to stay different for a while. The sunroom is mine again. I've started painting in there on weekend mornings. Nothing good, I'm not Petra, but it gives my hands something to do and my mind somewhere to go. The garden is coming back. The kitchen is mine. The coffee maker I bought to replace the capsule machine makes exactly the kind of strong, straightforward coffee I've always liked. It takes up just as much counter space as I want it to. There's something I think about sometimes when I'm in that sunroom with the morning light coming through the window the way it does in late spring. I think about how long I waited before saying the hard thing, how many times I adjusted myself, moved around them, made myself smaller so that everyone else could feel comfortable. And I think about what I would tell a woman who came to me with the same story, some patient of mine in some other life, some woman sitting across from me and describing the exact slow disappearance I experienced. I would tell her, you are allowed to name what is happening. You are allowed to say, this is my house and it is not yours. That's not cruelty. That's just the truth. And the truth, spoken clearly even late, is better than silence that goes on until it becomes the whole story. My name is Sylviane. I'm 64 years old. I live alone in my house in Gloucester, in the house I chose, in the house that has always had my name on it, and I'm doing just fine. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately, not in any grand or philosophical way, just in the ordinary practical way that you do when you finally have quiet enough to think. What I allowed to happen in my home didn't appear overnight. It arrived in small increments, each one reasonable enough on its own. A coffee maker moved, a room repurposed, a door with a lock that wasn't there before. None of those things, taken alone, would have alarmed anyone. But I know now that every time I adjusted without saying anything, I was teaching them something. I was teaching them that adjustment was available, that I would absorb whatever came without requiring an account. That's not generosity. I thought it was generosity for a long time. But generosity is something you give freely, with a full understanding of what you're giving. What I was doing was something quieter and more corrosive. I was shrinking to accommodate a situation that should never have been allowed to expand in the first place. And the longer I did it, the harder it became to stop, because stopping meant naming what had happened, and naming it meant I had to reckon with the fact that I had let it happen. That reckoning was uncomfortable. I won't pretend otherwise. When I finally sat across from my lawyer and laid out 26 months of it, I felt less like a woman asserting her rights and more like a woman confessing a long inattention. But she didn't treat it that way, and eventually I had to stop treating it that way myself. Here is what I actually believe. On the other side of it, the choices we make accumulate. Every time Victor and his wife took a little more and met no resistance, they moved further into an understanding that this was simply how things were. They weren't calculating. That's the part people don't always want to hear. Most of the people who take advantage of us aren't sitting in a room planning it. They just follow the path of least resistance, and if we keep clearing that path, they keep walking it. And the choices I made accumulated too. Every time I bit back what I wanted to say, every time I fixed something I shouldn't have fixed, every time I excused myself from my own living room, those choices added up into a situation where my son stood in my kitchen and genuinely seemed surprised that the house was mine. What I know now, and what I want to hold on to, is that clarity is not unkindness. Saying, this is mine, and here are the terms at the very beginning, that would not have been cold. That would have been honest. And honesty at the start of something is so much gentler than honesty delivered 2 years late with a legal document on the table. Petra said something to me after they moved out that I keep coming back to. She said, you didn't do this to punish him. You did this to stop punishing yourself. I think that's right. And I think that's worth remembering for anyone who's been managing around a situation that stopped being manageable a long time ago. It's not too late to tell the truth, it's just more complicated the longer you wait. That's all.